This is the DJI Air 2S and it has a massive 1-inch sensor. This is the DJI Mini 3 Pro and it has an even less massive 1/1/3 inch sensor. Join me today as I tell you why I shoot AE bracket mode on all photos when shooting with my DJI drones. Let's get into it. There's no doubt that these drones have absolutely revolutionized the way that we take photos and indeed videos. Tiny little compact machines that we can legally fly up to 120 meters in the air, 500 meters or visual line of sight away from you. You can do courses that will allow you to take them out of line of sight, fly them at night. All depends on the regulations of the place that you live. But they're amazing machines in good light. And that's the crux of this video. You need good light. If you've got high contrast, you've got low light, then you're going to be pushing the capabilities of these small sensors. And 1 inch is a small sensor. 1/3 of an inch is a tiny sensor. Marketing might promote them as massive sensors, large sensors, bigger sensors, but even the drones that we can buy at high-end consumer level are only using the micro 4/3 sensor, and that is the smallest size sensor that you will find on a mirrorless camera. The technology packed into these little devices is absolutely incredible. We can shoot 4K, 8K video in some cases, high dynamic range images up to 48 megapixels. We can shoot panoramics, we can shoot slow motion. It's incredible. But the limiting factor is the sensor size. And manufacturers can't really make compromises because the problem with the sensor size is as you get bigger, you need bigger lenses. Bigger lenses is more glass is more weight. More weight means you need more battery power, more sturdiness, bigger body, and more regulation. For that reason, these little drones are always going to be a compromise. Smaller sensors packing a whole lot of computational power, but always needing a little bit extra if you're shooting in difficult lighting conditions. I got my first drone in 2017. It was the DJI Phantom 3 4K, and I believe the sensor was actually smaller than this one. I would have to check that. But I learned then that I really had to shoot images, even in reasonable light, by bracketing them. Fortunately these days with the DJI Fly app that I have on this controller here, it's pretty easy to do. With the drone in photo mode, you can go to the setting and you can change it from single shot mode to AE bracketing. And then you can choose between 3 and 5 images. Now that's about the limit of the control you can have over your bracket, 3 or 5 images. You can't really control the steps on these smaller drones. So those of you coming from large cameras will find it a little bit limiting. But they do a good job. I always shoot a 5-image bracket and it does a really good job in actually boosting my dynamic range. One little annoyance that I seem to have with both of these drones and the DJI Fly app is it always defaults back to single mode. If you switch the drone off, if you replace the battery, it always defaults back to single shot mode. So you always have to remember to put it back into auto exposure bracket mode in the photo menu before you go shooting again. Usually if you forget, you take the first picture, you hear it only clicks once and you actually realize that you need to switch it over. So it's not a great issue, it's just a little annoyance. However, I always do shoot it. Memory cards are pretty cheap. The file sizes, even shooting RAW, which I always do, are pretty small compared to say my Fuji X-H2, which is pumping out 40 megapixel large RAW files. These RAW files are very small in size, so it's well worth shooting and bracketing pretty much everything. You can always throw away the stuff that you don't need, but there will be times when you need the bracketing. And I know a lot of you will be saying, well, you don't have to HDR everything, and that's absolutely right. You don't have to HDR everything, but By shooting those 5 image brackets, you're going to get an exposure which is going to be pretty much spot on. It might not be the metered exposure, it might be the one that's a little bit under, a little bit overexposed. You're giving yourself that extra space to get the right shot, the right exposure, the one that you can manipulate the most in Lightroom. So with editing in mind, I'm going to take you into Lightroom and we're going to have a look at single shots and 5 image brackets. And I'm going to edit both, and we're going to have a look at how much more dynamic range, how much more spectacular you can make your images by shooting those 5 image brackets as compared to a single image out of your DJI drone with its massive small sensors. Anyway, let's get into Lightroom and we'll have a look at what we can do with these images. So this is the image we're going to have a look at, and it was taken on the DJI Air 2S with its 1-inch sensor. So the dynamic range is probably slightly higher than it would be on the DJI Mini 3 Pro. We're going to take this image. I think this is probably the best one in terms of exposure. It's just inside both ends of the histogram there. And we'll take that over to the develop module. There is already some clipping in the highlights there, and can't quite see it, but there is also some in the shadows as well. You can see just down here there is some clipping in the shadows. So what we're going to do, we're trying to make the best image we can out of this. So I'm going to reduce the exposure overall, just to bring a little bit of definition into that sky. You can see that the clipping is disappearing slowly. I don't want to pull the whites down just yet. The next thing I'm going to do is bring the shadows up to bring a bit more light into the trees and the cathedral itself. And I'm going to bring the blacks down very slightly. And you can see there's clipping coming in, but that's probably acceptable. But as you can see, in terms of dynamic range, we're spread out all across the image, and we're clipping at the bottom, we're clipping at the top. We don't have a lot of wiggle room in this image. It's because we have a bright sky here, fairly dark shadows in the trees here. And if I pull these shadows up, as I have done like that, and zoom in, you can see that we are in fact introducing quite a bit of noise into that shadows area as well. So the next thing I'll do is I will pull up the sky. I will select the sky and see if we can just pull that down a little bit more. And I will do that using the highlights. So if I pull that down, you can see we can bring that just inside the histogram there and bring a little bit more definition to it, but it's still not great. If I come back to the main develop tools, you can see it's a nice image, but I can't really boost the contrast anymore. If I bring the blacks down, we've got all that shadow area we're losing there. If I bring the whites up very slightly, we start to clip in the sky there. So it's limited what we can do with this particular image. Now, if we go back to the library module, and then we're going to select all 5 of these images from the AE bracket, and we're going to go to Photo Merge HDR. We're going to leave the auto align on because the drone might have moved very, very slightly. We're going to leave auto settings on. We're going to leave the ghosting at low. There won't be a whole lot of ghosting, but as you can see, as it already pops in, it looks better just from this little preview image. Now, if I click the merge, we'll let that merge all together, and there we go. This is the merged image, this is the HDR image, and already without having to do anything, we've got more definition in it. We've got more leeway at the top and bottom. If we bring this over into the develop module, still a little bit of shadows creeping in there, but we can bring this down, exposure down a little bit. We can bring the shadows up a little bit. We can bring the whites up a little bit to bring some more contrast into it, and you can see we can push the whites a lot further. And then we can bring the highlights down to bring some more definition into the sky. Now, if I select the sky now, we can bring the highlights down a little bit further, a little bit more definition. We can add a little bit of clarity to it. And again, if we inverse this image, duplicate and inverse, push the contrast a little bit further without really actually introducing too much problems in the shadow areas. And we can now lift that exposure very slightly as well. And that is a much better image that we produced with the HDR than we did with the single image. It's got more range in it, it's got more color in it, it's got more contrast in it, and it just looks a better image overall. Now this has been a fairly easy example to do, but if you're shooting your DJI drones in real extremes of contrast, then you're going to see this even more so. By merging those HDR images, you're going to get a much better looking image overall. So I hope that's helped. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me a subscription and a like. If you've got any questions, please drop them into the comments below. And if you have any requests for videos, please let them know in the comments below as well. And I will see you in the next one.